Interreligious dialogue. What is it? How do we get there? Why is it important to us anyway? We talked today with Donna Howard of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries about interreligious dialogue. Stay with us for today's Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today for today's Austin Faith Dialogue. You know, we talk a lot about getting along with each other, talking across faith boundaries, but how do we really make that work? Well, today our guest, as we talk about interreligious dialogue, is Donna Howard. It's good to have you, Donna.
Thank you.
And you're a member of the Austin Area Interreligious Ministries Board.
Right.
And specifically the liaison to the Interreligious Commission, right?
That's right.
What does that mean?
Well, actually, the Interreligious Commission is an umbrella organization that has a variety of programs that are part of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries, such as the Interreligious Dialogue Group, the citywide Thanksgiving interreligious service that we have each year, and the Jewish-Christian Relation Group. The group that I'm primarily involved with, though, is the Interreligious Dialogue Group.
How long have you been doing this work?
This particular group has been meeting, about 2.5 years. It was actually started primarily by Kathy Solomon, who is a previous board member active in Temple Beth Israel, and she really nurtured this group along, and I got involved pretty much at the beginning. And it is a group of a wide variety of religious faiths, and we come together in a small, intimate setting to share our faith journey.
So it's simply people sitting around talking? That's all interreligious dialogue is?
Well, this particular group, pretty much that's the basic format that we have. We come together on a monthly basis, and someone is designated to be the speaker of the month. And we share our own personal faith journey, but we also share something about our own faith tradition. And the thing that I think has made this work for us and why we're continuing to meet and expanding what we're doing is that it's been a setting where people are able to come together in a safe, if you will, environment where they can talk about their faith journey and share it with people who are truly interested in sharing the journey by hearing about it, and not have to be concerned about someone judging a particular faith or belief that you have.
And is there then a particular purpose? It sounds to me like you folks are not trying to convert each other.
Correct.
Not trying to argue the correctness of your position, your particular beliefs. So why then are people spending this time?
I think one of the things that we have found is that this is a real opportunity to celebrate our diversity. We find our common ground, but we can also celebrate what's different about each other. Austin Area Interreligious Ministries' main mission here is to bring healing and hope by building community. And one of the ways that we can do that is to work together, the people of different faiths coming together to build community. And when we come together, it's inevitable that we're going to be in relationship with one another, and if we can facilitate that and provide more depth to our relationships through this dialogue, I think that's all to the better.
I went back, a month or so ago, and took a look at the log of all the programs we've done on Austin Faith Dialogue over the several years that we've been broadcasting. And we must have 12 times at least over the years looked at interreligious, interfaith dialogue. I was surprised that we have done this many times. Why would you say that interreligious dialogue is so important that we keep coming back to it?
I think it's really been kind of an evolutionary process, a growth process. When Austin Area Interreligious Ministries, which I'm going to call AIM from now on this program, when AIM began 12, 13 years ago, it was primarily a Catholic organization that eventually expanded its circle to include Protestants, eventually then expanding to include the Jewish population, and from there it's included a wide variety of faiths. We have Unitarian, Hindu, Muslim, Sufi, Sikh, Scientologists, a wide group of people who are involved with our programs. And I think that it keeps coming up because we keep expanding our circle. The idea is to draw the circle so that it's inclusive, rather than drawing a circle like a line in the sand to separate people. And so I think you're going to see it keep coming up as we continue to grow in our abilities to relate to one another and to widen our circle.
So it's important, of course, to at least talk with each other.
Absolutely.
So describe to us how one of your commission meetings happens. I would imagine some folks have not ever really had an experience of talking with someone whose faith is very different from theirs. How do you approach this?
Well, actually, it's really different each time. And people have different experiences that they bring to the table, which is, I think, what makes it such an exciting program for those of us that are interested in this. I'm thinking of one person in particular who had a fairly negative experience in the faith in which she grew up. And converted to a different faith as an adult. And when she came into this group, she had a lot of anger and resentment about the faith she had grown up in. But by hearing the stories of some other people who shared a similar faith but had had positive experiences, she was able to reconcile a lot of that. And so in some ways, it's a real personal kind of healing experience for people as well.
So how does a meeting happen? There are often, I imagine, difficulties in even giving an invocation so that it would be inclusive and not offensive to folks?
Well, I think, again, one of the evolutionary things that's occurred with this sort of thing is at one time we were trying to be oh so careful to not step on anybody's toes when we talked about things. Make sure that we didn't mention a particular deity or whatever that might offend another religion. And what we've come to find is that it's really much more healthy for us, it's much more natural for us to use whatever words, terminology, faith expressions we choose to use that are comfortable to us and that are part of our faith tradition. And that by doing so, we're not necessarily imposing it on anyone else. No one necessarily needs to feel threatened by that. And that's actually worked quite well for us.
Simply saying, this is who I am.
Correct.
So who comes? Just anyone from any faith tradition who cares to show up?
Exactly. It's an open meeting that we advertise through the newsletters of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries. And it's certainly open to anyone who would be interested in joining us. The groups have been fairly small, I think probably about 15 at any one time, and I'm not sure as we evolve here if we want to change the format if we get larger. But for right now, certainly anyone is welcome to come. It's a sack lunch type affair and very informal, warm, friendly group.
Sounds like a very interesting way to meet people from all across Austin.
Is.
I'm curious, what is it about your background, your particular interests, that have caused you to spend so much time on interreligious dialogue?
I probably can't answer that exactly, but I did grow up here in Austin, and the first half of my life I spent in University Baptist Church. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with a minister, Dr. Blake Smith, who had a reputation for being an extremely inclusive person that invited a lot of interreligious dialogue at that time in the 50s and 60s. And so I was bred on that, if you will. And as an adult, for various reasons, primarily because my husband's father was a Unitarian minister, I was introduced to that faith, found it to be quite a good fit for me, and then joined and became very active in the Unitarian Church here in Austin.
So it's been an evolution.
It has been, and it's been something that the interest in the interreligious dialogue has been there all my life, I guess. And being Unitarian and being one who looks at what I can learn from all the great religions of the world, it's quite natural for me to want to talk with people who have beliefs that they can share with me that gives me insights into my own belief system.
And so then what have you found different in you and in your expression of your faith as a result of this dialogue work?
One of the things I think that comes to mind immediately is the way we limit ourselves by labeling people. And I think this is not just in religion, it's in politics, it's in all aspects of our lives, but to get past the labels and to get underneath and find out what people are really thinking, what they're really believing, the way they really express their faith has been a widening experience for me. I can give an analogy of politics in that I served on a local school board, and when I came on I had a different political ideology from the other members of that board, and I think we greeted each other with a certain bit of trepidation at the beginning because we were labeling one another. But once we got past the labels, found our common ground, found that we shared similar values and goals, we were able to work together for the greater good. And I think you find that in the greater religious community too.
And how then have you lived out these changes, these broader understandings in your local congregation?
Well, our local congregation is very active in the programs of AIM, for one thing, and there are people within my congregation who are involved with some of the interreligious aspects of that program. We're also involved with the efforts in the community for racial reconciliation. And again, that's one of the things that I think this particular program, the Interreligious Dialogue program, facilitates and is going to help as we're continuing to work on that program too.
In what kinds of ways?
Well, one of the basic things about anything you're trying to reconcile or have relationship about is dialogue. And so whatever we can do to allow ourselves to feel comfortable dialoguing with one another, to really listen to one another, to try to understand the different paths we take that may get us to the same goal, but we choose different paths to get there, I think can sometimes give us the understanding that we need that may help us get past, again, some of the labels and some of the obstacles that have prevented us from having the kind of reconciliation I think a lot of us would truly like to have.
So AIM sees racial reconciliation and interreligious dialogue as related.
I think they are very related, yes. And certainly I think that anything that we can do where we sit down and take off the masks and really talk about the things that are important to us, that will just help us to deal with the issues that are out there that sometimes get clouded up by the masks that we put on, the labels that we put on one another. So yes, certainly I think they are related.
Well, when we come back then in the second half, I want to ask you to give us some tips about how we can begin to talk with people who are of different faiths, and maybe talk a little bit about the process of developing our community-wide Thanksgiving service, which is such a celebration of who we are.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Donna. We'll be right back. And thank you for being here for the first half. Don't go away. We'll be right back on Austin Faith Dialogue. We're glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking about interreligious dialogue, how we talk with all those wonderful folks who are in the Austin area these days and whose faiths are different from ours. We're talking with Donna Howard, who's a board member of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries and also chair, for want of a better word, of the Interreligious Commission. Thanks, Donna, for being here.
Thank you.
And in the first half, we talked a little bit about the kinds of work that the Commission does and the safe space it creates for dialogue. Now, what kind of hints can you give those of us who perhaps haven't had an opportunity yet to really talk with someone of a different faith about how we start that conversation and how we share clear clearly who we are, while at the same time respecting the other person's beliefs?
That is a difficult thing, I think, and the beauty, of course, of having a group like this is that it gives you the environment in which to do that sort of thing, because I think sometimes it does feel artificial when we try to talk with somebody with the express purpose of trying to develop a relationship. How do you really make that happen? One of the things that we found, if I can take it to a little different place for a second, in regard to working in the working with different races and ethnic groups. In the past, through AIM, we've had a program where we've had what we call sister churches, and we would match up a primarily Anglo-white church with a primarily African-American church in this case. My church was matched up with one. We got together periodically. We shared choirs. We had some social events, and it was all quite pleasant, and we had some good times, but it kind of faded away. It didn't do what we intended it to do because we weren't really developing the intimate relationships that would bind us together and allow us to continue past those artificial beginnings that you have to create sometime. What we're looking at now and trying to work toward is to use programs such as the programs of AIM to help us have a formalized way of coming together and have something, a goal to work on that allows us to develop the relationship kind of incidentally, even though if that relationship may be our primary goal in some ways. For instance, if we match up with another church and worked on hands-on housing to rebuild and refurbish a home, that would provide us a common goal, a common task. We'd be working side by side, and we think that the dialogue would then just begin simply because we're working with one another, and that might be a first step. So I think that one of the things I would suggest is finding ways that you can work on common projects, common goals, and that oftentimes the dialogue can at least start at that place.
And how do you get over then those bumpy places? There are bound to be those when someone may try to argue with you about your faith, and the conversation may take a turn that you hadn't expected.
We've been very fortunate to not have that happen very frequently in our groups. I think because most people come in with a real desire to learn about one another, and so that kind of judgment really hasn't entered in too often. However, it has happened occasionally, and I don't know that there's some magic answer of what to do about it other than to let people know that this is a place where we really want to talk openly and share things, and that if we do allow judgment to come in, that oftentimes will stifle the conversation, stifle the relationship, and it won't take us where we want to go. So it's, I guess, gentle reminders, if you will, of what our purpose is and why we're there. But as I say, most of the people that come into this are there because they want to. They want to learn about each other. One of the things that came up recently from a member sharing in our group, I really liked this phrase. She was talking about sharing sacred spaces. And again, this is another idea I guess I could offer to the audience. Just by simply visiting each other's places of worship, which we have done, the simple act of going into the sacred space allows you to almost feel more of a comfort in then talking with someone. There seems to be a mystique sometimes we place on these other religions and other sacred spaces, primarily because we haven't even visited them. We know so little about them, it makes it difficult to feel comfortable with the discussion, but actually sharing the space can oftentimes open the lines of communication some too and make you feel like, okay, I have a little familiarity here, I can take it a step further.
And that makes me think then of the AIM event that probably better than any other allows us to share each other's sacred space once a year, which is the Interfaith Thanksgiving service.
Right.
Now, you this year are helping with the organizing committee, and perhaps you have in the past. Talk a little bit about that process. What has it been like for you to sit in that committee and have people really talk about how do we worship together?
Well, the committee is one process, of course, you're right, and I will answer your question about that, but I also want to make sure I say something about the service itself, because that is one of the most rewarding experiences for me personally, and I want to make sure I say something about that, This will be our 17th year to do it. And as you have said, we do change the venue, if you will, where we host the Thanksgiving service. It's always the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And we've had it in, again, a wide variety of faith homes. It has been limited by size because we attract a fairly large crowd, so we need a large facility. Last year we had it at Temple Beth Israel. I think it was the year before we had it at Barsana Dam. We are this year planning to have it at First United Methodist Church, and I'm very pleased to be able to do that. The service itself is a wonderful opportunity for the different expressions of faith. And again, I think this is where I was mentioning earlier that we've evolved. At one time, I think we were very careful about what we allowed to be said in these services. And now we come in knowing that when we have 12 to 14 clergy members sitting at the front of this church or mosque or synagogue or whatever the religious space is, that they will be able to get up and say a Thanksgiving prayer that honors their own faith tradition. And the members that are present, the participants in the audience, are free to participate with those faith expressions or not, but they are present for them. They see the variety of faith expressions. It is just a wonderful experience. It's one of the most spiritual things that I think I participate in. And then we also have other things at the service, such as children's choirs, adult choirs, dancing, a wide variety of faith expressions, and all in the name of coming together as a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multi-religious community. But you asked about the planning, which
yes, what's that like?
The planning is interesting, just like it is for anything that you plan for. There's always, when you're getting to the nitty-gritty and the behind-the-scenes planning of something, you probably are going to have a few more little conflicts that might come up. I think that, again, though, the goals are so similar for the group. We all want this to be an opportunity to be as inclusive as possible. I think everyone that comes to the table here wants it to be inclusive. So we do our best to make sure that all those who wish to participate have a place in the service to participate. And when the little uncomfortable things come up, we talk about them. There have been things that have happened in a service that may have been a faith expression that didn't feel like that it really came off the way that the congregation or the faith tradition who was actually doing this expression wanted it to come off. I'm not making myself clear there, but what I'm trying to say is, for instance, we had a situation where a shofar was blown to call to worship. And this would be a very appropriate thing to do, but it was done at a time when it was not really a true expression of the way that it is used within the Jewish community. And so there was some concern among the Jewish participants that this was inappropriate, not among the other faiths. So we actually have criticism of ourselves sometimes in our own particular faith traditions in doing this, but we talk about it and we change and alter and try to make it as comfortable as we can.
Try to make it, it sounds like, an authentic expression of the real kaleidoscope that is Austin these days.
That's a much better expression than comfortable, is authentic, yes, because it's not going to be comfortable for everybody, but hopefully it will be authentic.
I wonder if our interfaith service is a model for other places, communities around the country that are doing this.
There are, and I have to say that I don't know a whole lot about it at this point in time, although our executive director, Susan Wills, has been doing some investigating of this. She's visited some of these other communities and does have some information about how some other communities are doing these things. However, I do not believe anybody's doing things in the same way, of course, that we are, and I think that our Thanksgiving service is very unique, I think, in how we do that. It's certainly much more inclusive than I know some people have said they've had in other communities where it has primarily been a Christian-Jewish expression and not as representative of so many different faiths that we have here in this community.
As you look down the road a little bit and in Austin and the diversity that is our community, what would you like to see happen in the whole arena of interreligious dialogue?
I would like to see more things happening in the community that allow for those of us that have different expressions of faith to be able to come together for the greater good and not get so hung up in the different ways that we have of expressing those faiths that keep us from doing those things we truly wish to do. And I guess I'm really thinking of this in a larger context than just different religious expressions. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's really like different political expressions, different philosophical expressions. When we really get down to talking with one another, we really find, I think, that we share much more than we have differences. Common goals, common values permeate this community. We get so hung up in some of the specifics that we don't really get the things done that we need to do, and there is so much that needs to be done in this community. There are wonderful things happening, but there's so much more we could do. And I think of the things like the inequities in the school situations and that sort of thing. That involves so many facets, but whatever we can do to have better communication with each other, and to understand one another and to respect one another, I think will go a long way to helping us solve those problems.
Creating, I suppose, then some common ground, not only in our faith conversations, but in our other conversations.
Absolutely.
So then, if someone is interested, or as someone is interested, in coming to participate in these interreligious dialogues, or any of the other things that fall under the umbrella of the Commission, how would they begin to do that?
Well, I think one of the first things they can do is make sure they look at your program and see what's advertised there, postings of upcoming meetings. But the phone number and address of AIM are displayed here on your program. They could certainly call the AIM, and there's information about our meetings. We typically meet monthly. At this point in time, we're meeting the third Thursday of the month from 11:30 to 1 at Temple Beth Israel. Because that's not always going to be the case. I hate to say just always show up at that time, but that is when we're meeting now, and they can always call the AIM office and find out for sure when we're meeting, and anyone is welcome to attend.
And you're right, what a wonderful way to spend a lunch hour, learning
Absolutely.
and sharing and growing. Well, Donna, that half an hour is just way too short to talk about everything that we could in the area of interreligious dialogue and working with each other, but thank you for coming, for sharing ideas, and for reminding us of the Thanksgiving service this fall, too. We'll want to see a lot of people there, and we'll see you again on one of these shows.
Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us this week on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week right here.